Welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul, a space where every story matters, every voice is honored, and no journey is left untold. Let's journey together through the flames, uncovering the beauty of redemption, restoration, and the unbreakable human spirit. So welcome to Through the Fire with Angelina Paul. I have Suzanne with me today, and I am so excited that you're here today, Suzanne. How are you feeling about the podcast today?
I'm pretty excited.
Yeah?
Yes.
Great. So I always start the episode with just sharing after we spoke, and in preparing what that brought for me. There's always revelation that comes because this is also a healing journey for me and a learning journey for myself. So when I spoke with you, the first thing that you said was the word that came to you was poverty. Mm-hmm. And in that instant, for me, I know for you, it means something different, and we'll have an opportunity to explore that. But that to me made me start thinking, what areas in my own life do I have a poverty mindset? Mm-hmm. Because I grew up being told that poverty is only connected to finances or money. Mm-hmm. But I'm realizing now more so that there are things that I lack, because in those areas, I'm almost in an impoverished state of mind. Mm-hmm. So our conversation yesterday, you started me off on this journey of self-reflection. And I hope it's going to become a journey of self-discovery of areas where I am operating with a mindset of poverty that may not be necessarily connected to money. Mm-hmm. So I thank you for that. And on that note, I want to ask you, can you describe what that word has meant to you throughout your life?
Well, it definitely had to do with money a lot through my whole life, for sure. Like living below the poverty line, never really wanting anything more. Never thinking I was deserving of anything more.
Yeah.
Just all those different components. But yeah, like you, I've realized too that it has more to do with other areas of my life as well.
Right.
Like experiencing a time when I had no friends.
Right.
Like I was alienated basically during my marriage. So, things like that throughout my life. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your childhood. So when you were telling me that you grew up on a farm, you grew your own crops and your own food, basically, and you raised animals, and so you're eating off of the farm. And when we say this, to most people, it comes across, there are people who are desiring that now, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of these things that our society talks about, the importance of growing your own food, knowing where your food comes from. Now it's this very huge and lavish thing that everybody must really, really want, and if they can, they should do it. But there were some experiences in your childhood where, as you were growing up in this space that is so desired in our times, this was basically the beginning of noticing that there were some differences maybe with other people in the community. So I want to talk about your perspective on having neighbors that were farmers. You mentioned your neighbors that were dairy farmers, used to go and visit with them, but you noticed that nobody would ever come to your home, or at least from your understanding, your parents never invited anyone to come to your home. Can you explain to me a little bit about that and maybe elaborate on what you think that was about?
I think it was a sense of my parents just not feeling like they were good enough to host people. A sense of shame around our whole family, even around like our last name.
Right. Yeah.
Just the feeling. It wasn't even really spoken a lot.
Right.
We didn't speak about it. It was like the elephant in the room.
Yeah. So you noticed that there was a lot of shame, where maybe the reason why there were no people visiting you is there was a sense of shame around maybe how your home was or how your life was in your home, that they never brought people around. You alluded a little bit about the name. So we just talked about it before we came on, that even your father would say that it's because of your family name that things are the way that they are for your family. And you even said that at some point, your dad would say that he also didn't think that there was much to his life. How do you think that translated to your own view of yourself and your worth?
Yeah, struggle with self-worth.
Yeah.
For sure, throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
And just thinking that the words I said didn't matter.
Right. Yeah. So that made you really feel like you had no worth, you had nothing to say that was worthy, and your father saying this almost affirmed that what you felt about yourself was in fact true. Wow. What does that, so tell me, around what age has this come to your awareness that there's something wrong? My dad keeps reiterating this thing about our name not having any value, and you're feeling this unworthiness. Around what age was this?
I'm trying to think. I think it was through my teen years, for sure. Like after I graduated from high school, I just remember wanting to get away and start a new, fresh life.
Yeah. It's really overwhelming. I can't even imagine carrying all that as a teenager. You're supposed to be excited about your life. You're supposed to be making all these plans of what you were looking forward to. Did you at all have time to have these kind of thoughts, or was it just, I need to get away?
I don't remember planning.
Yeah.
I was not in a thrive mode at all. I was just surviving.
Right. So your teenage years, for the most part, you remember just being in survival mode. Wow. You and I talked about names, right? And what they mean. And I don't know what that would have done to me. I can see why it would have been devastating for you, because even for me in my culture, not only are our names, very important, but they're also connected to, you could even say, a spirit animal. So we call it a totem. So wherever you come from, what region of Africa you come from, you carry a totem. And so as I shared with you, ours is monkey. And the monkey, so basically your family, if they're associated with that animal, it means that in your behaviors and in how you show up for yourself, it's associated with that animal. So for us, there's a good side that the monkeys are very creative and savvy and, intuitive and all of these things. But there's also that side of trickery. And so, people who come from my side of the family, there's always the expectation that, they can manipulate you, they could dupe you in some way. And you just shared, and I know we're kind of moving ahead of ourselves, but because we're there, I want to talk about it. You said that because of what your father had said about names and what it meant to you in terms of just feeling bad about yourself, that when you had your child, you were very careful about naming them. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, my husband and I were very intentional about making sure that there was positive, good, strong meaning behind the name we chose.
Right.
Ruler of the Valley, I think, is the name of the meaning of the name that we chose.
Right.
And
Ruler of the Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kendall, that's what Kendall means.
Okay.
And fast forward when my child was in grade 7, they decided that they were going to change their name.
Right.
And they'd also decided that they were non-binary, so going by they, them pronouns, and was a big adjustment.
Right. Do you think that, like when you said they decided, I want you to expound a bit on, just based on your experience, do you think that it was a mental decision, that your child made, or like how has that been for you?
I feel like they just felt like Kendall didn't suit them anymore, I think is what it was. So they chose a different name.
Right.
And it was really hard at first because we had been so intentional about choosing a name.
Right.
That meant a lot.
What part impacted you the most? Was it that they are now non-binary, or was it that they changed their name, or was it both?
The name was the hardest part.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why wasn't the non-binary part hard for you?
Because they're still my child.
Right. Was that always your feeling around sexuality? Or I'm just always curious about that journey, because it's a topic that is very prevalent in our society right now. And many parents are always looking to how they can navigate it. So I'm interested in knowing, because I do know that you come from a Christian a background. So how did that journey play out for your family?
Well, I definitely process it differently than my kid's dad did.
Right.
I think maybe he's even still processing it.
Right. Yeah.
Several years later.
Yeah.
But
how many years later is it?
Well, they're in grade 11 now. So
Okay.
It was 7. Yeah.
So grade 7, grade 11. Okay.
Yeah. I think what I focused on is just loving my child.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that part also comes from how you were raised, where you felt that you didn't have a voice, and now that you have this opportunity to show up for a child, even with the many things that you might not have known, could it be that that was the reason why what was more important then was loving and being there and ensuring that their voice mattered as opposed to anything else?
Well, yeah. I think that relationship is the most important.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an ideal relationship with my parents.
Right.
So
it's important for you to maintain one with your daughter.
Yeah.
Right. So what did you say to them when they came out?
Well, I'm always telling them, reminding them that they will never do anything, or they will never do or say anything that will ever make me love them any less.
Right. Did you have a conversation with them about the name and how you felt about that?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. Because maybe they didn't know. Did they know how you came about the name? Was this always like when they're a kid, you said, hey, we really thought about your name? Or was it at that point where you're like, oh my God, the name is going to change? And you think, maybe this is my chance to talk about the intentionality of picking this name?
I think that they did know about it.
Yeah.
Because Dad actually started a company with the same name.
Right.
And I almost wonder in the back of my mind if maybe they felt it was too much pressure.
Right. Yeah.
To have that name.
And I think that's a very valid thought, right? Because there's so many, even though the names for us as parents mean something to us, it can become overwhelming because that meaning you're almost wanting your child to be that. And what did you say the meaning of the name was?
Ruler of the valley.
Ruler of the valley. So this, is asking for a personality that is authority and leadership. And as we've all lived this life, we know that when you're a leader, when you're a person that people are looking to the most and all of these things, it's so much pressure in our society. People do things for followers now and all of these things because there's the pressure of being whatever the expectation is of everybody else.
Yeah.
So would you have some sort of empathy towards them, though, when you think of it in that light, that there was pressure?
Definitely.
Right. Yeah. Did they take the time when they chose their name, though, like you did? And did they explain what the meaning is? Or was it just like mom and dad, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be the ruler of the valley. I'm going to be something else.
No, they just started going by a different name at school. And then I think it was actually a little while before we even learned about this.
Yeah.
Right. So,
did you hear someone called that name or
I don't remember what the first one was, but it was a more of gradual kind of change rather than all at once.
I think it is very fascinating. And I think in this instance, I can say that statement that God works in miraculous ways or mysterious ways. Because the name, you have this story of how your name was presented to you by your father, and it brought up so many feelings that were not always encouraging and empowering for yourself. Yeah. Then, you have that at the back of your mind, and you now have an opportunity. You're blessed by God to be a parent, and you sit there and you really think about names. I know even biblically, most people that have great stories, their names were very intentional as well. So you have an opportunity to do that, and you bring a name that has power. And, now your child also now gets an opportunity to choose their name. In that light, can you maybe look back at it and say, maybe the name doesn't really have to mean what it means to somebody else. My name can mean what I desire for it to mean for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We can definitely change the meanings for sure as we go through life.
Yeah. And, whatever someone projects to you, projects on you regarding your name, that's them. It's quite interesting. My husband is named after his father. And he's always shortened that name. And whenever I say the full name, he doesn't like it. Like everyone now in our community, our circle of friends know that he doesn't like the full name. And it's because of what that name means to them, because he grew up, with so much trauma that was at the hand of his father. And so the name reminds him of that. He hasn't gone as far as changing the name legally, but at least he carries the shorter version of the name, which to me implies there's still a part of him that does want to be connected to his father, the father that at least he envisioned in him. But now that we are starting to do a lot more of community work, I always say to him, if we keep the name or have kept the name, which you have, we need to bring a different meaning. You need to leave a legacy behind this name that you are proud of, that somebody else will be proud to carry. And even if they didn't carry it, whenever the name is spoken, there will be a story of power and courage and empathy and love behind that name. So I almost feel like in that regard, maybe, God wants to tell you today that, it reminds me of the scripture that said, I've called you by your name, you are mine. So God has a name for us that maybe is not the name that somebody wants to use to manipulate or hurt us, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. So I want to talk about your leaving home. You left home, this home that you were in where you had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and you wanted to get away. And your getaway was where?
I went to Bible college.
Right.
I listened to my parents. They advised me that at least 1 year of Bible college was smart to do.
Right.
So I chose one that was a few hours away from home rather than one that was really close to home.
Right. Because the agenda is still you're getting away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you go to Bible school, you're getting away. At this point, do you believe you have a calling in the ministry, or was for you the largest motivation was, I'm the one of my siblings who's listening to my parents, and I also do want to get away, and this is sort of like a win-win situation?
Yeah. I think I probably wanted to be called into ministry.
Right.
But I also felt at that time that I was not worthy of being called into ministry.
Why?
Just still that I'm not important kind of messages that to myself.
So growing up in a family, you said you all used to go to church. Your parents had gone to Bible school, and maybe at some point you said they might have been pastors or pastored. So in hearing that, it makes me, believe that there was a lot of Bible teaching in how you were raised or in your home.
Yeah.
Why would, even in spite of those teachings, you still felt that you were unworthy?
I don't think I claimed any of the scriptures for myself.
Right.
I think I basically lived my parents' faith. And I don't think it was until my 40s, actually, that I actually realized, oh, yeah, this is for me.
Yeah. Lived your parents' faith. That is very interesting, because a lot of people do that. And I think even for myself, I also believe that it's later in life that I could really say I'm a believer, knowing it for myself, not what somebody else taught me. Do you think that that is important in our journey of faith, to have our own experiential experiences than to continue to rely on what we've been told?
Oh, very much.
Right. Yeah. What did you learn about that at Bible school? How you can have a personal relationship with God that is not always reliant or connected to somebody else's faith?
Yeah. I learned a lot of head knowledge. And maybe just it didn't move, those 6 inches from the head to the heart.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I think I know I had lots of real experiences in my teen years, even, and through Bible college. But those experiences, those feelings, they go away, right?
Yeah.
And because those feelings go away, I just lived my own life. I knew God was there. I knew that He always, that scripture that says He holds you in the palm of His hand.
Yeah.
I knew He was holding me.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah. What is the one experience that you had for yourself where you seriously started to consider your own personal relationship with God? And what was that experience?
Well, I remember several times in my younger years, I think I actually came to faith for the first time around 10 years old.
Yeah.
So, of course, I grew up in that generation of almost fear of not being saved.
Yeah.
Like where, I don't know about you, but those movies that came out, like Thief in the Night and things like that, were all kind of put fear in your heart. You know, like if I'm not saved, then I'm not going to go to heaven, and I'm not
going to hell.
Yeah. So I think that because of that generation that I grew up in, I wanted to make sure I was saved. So every time there was an altar call, I would go, or things like that.
You wanted to make sure you're engaging God to the utmost of your ability, so you would not go to hell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that those teachings emphasized more on not going to hell than loving God or having a relationship with him?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your what's your conversation with your daughter concerning the faith now that they are non-binary?
Well, we don't talk a huge amount about anything
Right.
relating to God. They've said that they believe in God, I think, but not in the same way that I do.
Right.
They think I'm too Christian.
Do you think that what they're saying is they believe in God, but they don't believe when people say because you're non-binary, you're going to go to hell?
I'm not sure if they've heard that message or not.
Yeah.
For sure. I know that they felt like they haven't been able to fit in to like a youth group.
Yeah.
At the church I go to, which I think is sad. I think that
because I'm sure they're not talking about being non-binary at that youth group, are they?
No.
Yeah.
No. But I mean, they also look different too.
Yeah.
They have piercings and things like that.
Right.
Not everybody has. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, and they just haven't been able, like, they were going to my church for a while and then decided that they didn't fit in.
They're not fitting in. Yeah. Right. And you can relate to that, right? Not fitting in because you had that same feeling you mentioned earlier, that just not having friends.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can see that as a parent, that it brings a cry in our heart when we know that our children are good and beautiful people.
Yeah.
And because they've chosen a different path or they're interested in different other things and they're not fitting in a certain box, that then our society doesn't create space for them and shuns them away. As a mother, one of the things that I do a lot is pray for my children.
Yes.
I have conversations with God about my children.
Yes.
What is your conversation about, because I know you have 2 children?
No, just one.
Just your one daughter. Yeah. Okay. So what is so then you're doing a lot of talking to God than I am, because I have a chance. I got 2. I'm like, this one messes up, God, make this one right. No. So this is your one chance, your legacy, right?
Yeah.
In light of they being non-binary, what is your conversation with God now? Because I'm sure the prayers when they were 5 have now changed. How have they changed?
Yeah. Well, my kid has also had a lot of mental health issues.
Right.
And also some diagnosis, like autism and some other things. So I just... I don't even know if I can put it into words, because it's more of a cry of my heart than actual words.
Yeah, you cry to God for your child.
Yeah,
I can understand that. But in that cry, like when I think of, I know that in the Bible it talks about the Holy Spirit, does the groaning, and interceding on our behalf. And I can understand that cry where you know that before the Father, your child is perfect.
Yeah.
They are whole. They are loved. They are received. They are worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it a beautiful thing to have that in spite of how the world may treat our children?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to Bible school, and it's an escape, but also a way to appease your parents. Mm-hmm. And you talked about, your siblings having left home. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that impacted you you said you referred to yourself as you were the good child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was the youngest of 4.
Yeah.
I am the youngest of 4, I guess. I still am. And with just one by one, my siblings decided to go their own way.
Yeah.
And have like relationships and do things that my parents did not approve of.
Right.
in any way, shape, or form.
Do you know what it was that they weren't approving of concerning those relationships?
Well, I don't remember how old I was, but I do remember like a physical fight between my brother and my parents.
Yeah.
I believe they were washing his mouth out with soap because he probably swore or something.
Yeah. They were washing his mouth with soap because he was swearing.
I think so. I think I'm not exactly sure what was going on anymore. I just remember the fight, and I think
he was using language that was inappropriate.
I think he left after that.
Yeah,
pretty close, and left school. Didn't graduate from high school, and just kind of went down his own path. I think he was the first one to have a child out of wedlock,
right?
And then,
so that was definitely unacceptable.
Yeah,
I know a thing about that.
And actually surprised me though, because my parents kind of opened their arms to the mother and the child,
but not to him,
because no, to him too. Yeah. But he was kind of resistant, anyways, right?
Yeah.
Because they had fought and they had been at odds with each other. So for several years before that. So, but yeah, they all just kind of went their own way. And I just decided that, well, I was still pretty young too. I was in my teens, but I decided to just kind of follow along with what my parents said to do.
Yeah.
Anytime that I tried to do something,
what is it that they said for rebellious. You to do? What were the rules? I want to know, Suzanne. Like, let us in here. So I want to know, one, this excessive, what do I want to call it? Guidance techniques, like washing mouths with soap. Was this something that was common in your home? Like, was there always this extreme measures of discipline?
I don't remember having extreme discipline on me.
Yeah.
I remember my sister and I, the one the closest to me, 4 years older, we would play fight every once in a while.
Yeah.
And my dad, I remember this one time especially that we were play fighting, and my dad got upset and he walked out of the room and slammed the door behind him. And I mean, he was obviously upset and angry. Yeah. But that was kind of the extent of punishment, I guess.
Yeah. Was it intimidating though and scary when that happened for you guys? You knew that this
we stopped fighting.
Yeah. You knew that this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And so your siblings, when they are all leaving home, your brother leaves, your two sisters leave, they have these lifestyles that are not acceptable. Your brother has a child out of wedlock. And obviously this is all religious guided, because that's where we hear the child out of wedlock, referenced. Mm-hmm. Do you think, based on your own experience, that also your siblings were looking to get away?
It's very possible.
Right.
And quite likely, actually, looking back on it now, for sure.
That's what they were also doing.
Yeah.
So even if they sort of maybe left you with the burden of appeasing your parents, do you have some sort of compassion towards their leaving, just from your own understanding and your own experience?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. How did you feel, though, when they were leaving at the time? Were you angry that they were going? Did you think that, okay, they're just moving on with their lives?
Not too sure that I worried too much about it.
Yeah.
I think I missed them to a certain degree. My oldest sister's 10 years older than me, and I didn't actually get to know her very well until I myself was quite a bit older. Yeah. Right. So, was
their leaving announced? Was it okay, I'm leaving home now? Or was it always in, amidst a fight or an argument of some sort, or you're doing this that we don't like and they say, well, if that's the case, then I'll leave? Like, was it a nice leaving, like, where it's like, okay, my sibling is of age, they're gonna go now? Or was there always some sort of tension behind their leaving home?
Well, my oldest sister, I think just, I think it was pretty normal for her to go off and get a job and
she was old
do
enough.
her thing.
Yeah.
But my brother, like I said, he left early. Like I think he was in grade 9 or 10 or something like that when he left and didn't finish school. So his was more of a abrupt, I'm gone, I'm out of here. And then my other sister, again, I think because she wanted to go move in with this guy or move up north with this guy.
Yeah.
That hers was, again, more of a conflict.
Yeah. Did you feel lonely after your siblings left?
Oh, probably.
Yeah. Lonely or alone?
Probably a bit of both, really.
Yeah.
I remember I would get on my bicycle and I would ride around the countryside, miles upon miles upon miles of road, and just ride.
Just trying to get away from whatever this was that you couldn't really articulate.
Yeah.
So you said you were wanting to do what your parents were telling you. What were some of the things that you remember being told that you knew this has to be in my list of things to do in order to appease my parents?
Do well in school.
Right.
And these weren't exactly spoken rules either, but do well in school, make sure I'm going to church, probably on average 3 times a week.
Yeah. Because this is what was happening in the home anyway when you were growing up, right?
Yeah.
So it was, in some ways, they had the same expectations of you that they were also giving to themselves, or at least what they were practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, with your brother, you knew you shouldn't have a child out of wedlock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're at school, you're at college, you're going through this, you've escaped, you're on this new path. You told me that you met your husband in Bible school.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about your love story?
I think it was my 3rd year of Bible college.
Yeah.
My best friend in Bible college and I met some of these guys that came that year. And,
there was no love story.
Well,
that's it. We're shutting down the podcast. Suzanne told me there is this illicit love story at the Bible college, and she refuses to tell it now. And I'm joking.
Well, I had never really had a boyfriend up to that point.
What?
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was 19. 19? Yeah, 19.
Wow. You really were the good child.
Yeah. I'd maybe gone on the odd date here or there, but
never had like a relationship where you're like, we're boyfriend and girlfriend and we're going together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my husband turned out to be my first boyfriend.
Right.
My first kiss.
Yeah.
I think I just got caught up in it all and thought, when he proposed, I think my thoughts were, what if there's nobody else out there for me? I better go for this, right?
Well, what was the proposal like? Did you get on one knee? Did he make a whole to-do? Was it an event that your friends knew but you didn't know and it was kept secret from you? How big was the rock, Suzanne?
Well, it was actually his grandmother's ring, so it was quite
even
special.
More sentimental.
Yeah. He had a little truck at the time, and we were parked on Nose Hill Drive in Calgary and looking at the view, and he didn't get down on one knee because we were in a truck. So that's
fine. We'll forgive him for not doing the one knee thing. So you get the ring, and this is supposed to be like, I don't know if I can say this now because the world has really changed, but at least from my experience, this would have been, in my generation, the thing that every girl is the moment you're waiting
Mm-hmm.
to arrive. But in your mind, you are thinking, maybe nobody else will come. And this is the only one. And I better take this.
And I don't think it was even conscious, really, at the time.
Subconsciously.
But subconsciously, I think that was my motivation.
Yeah.
Because there had been some red flags through our relationship, even up to that point.
Yeah. Like what?
Like one night when we almost broke up.
Yeah.
And he kind of flew off the handle. And I don't even know what he was threatening to do, but he was threatening to take some sort of action, not against me, because he wasn't even in the same place as me.
Yeah.
But probably against himself. Like, we thought he was threatening to take his own life.
To take his own life if you left him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was a huge red flag.
That's a very, very huge, because that's
Very
the
huge.
height of manipulation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
because it might just be the only one, you were willing to bypass some of those things that were red flags.
pretty much. And that all comes back to my own self-esteem, because I didn't think I was worthy.
Exactly. So then, in that moment, it was maybe a little glimpse of worthiness or whatever it was, because you hadn't felt it or seen it really yet. It was, you were willing to at least accept whatever illusion of it that you were experiencing at that time.
Yeah.
So you get married and you're both in Bible school.
No, we're out of Bible school.
You're out of
by that
Bible
time.
school. And he's convinced that he has a calling on his life to pastor.
Yeah.
So you're going to become the pastor's wife.
Yeah.
And what are your plans at that time to do with your Bible school education? Were you wanting to pastor as well? Or, was it just now you've passed the phase of appeasing your parents, now you can maybe start your own self-discovery and journey?
Well, I kind of envisioned myself being a pastor's wife and having children and kind of being a stay-at-home mom. I think that was my thoughts.
Yeah.
And it did not turn out that way.
I'm curious to know, what was your vision of what a pastor's wife life would look like?
Like helping out in the church quite a bit.
Yeah.
Not holding a regular job by any means, but like helping her husband shepherd the flock.
Right.
Whether that means having people over or having coffees with people to help counsel them
and encourage them in the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. And raising your kids and just being the helpmeet for your husband.
Yeah.
So your husband gets his first job to pastor a church. At what point in that experience do you realize that your vision of the pastor's wife is not happening?
I expected to supplement our income at first, for sure, because the church couldn't pay us very much.
Right. Churches, start paying your people.
Yeah. I think that
God would like that.
I think they're doing a little better nowadays than they used to. But,
because this was a while back.
This was like
sure.
This was 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I would be celebrating my 30th wedding anniversary this year if I was still married. So I did expect to have some supplementation.
Yeah.
But sorry, what was the question again?
The question is, so you've started, your husband is pastoring.
Yeah.
You've started. So my question to you was, at what point did you realize that the vision of the pastor's wife who entertains while counseling, who's the helpmeet, who's helping out a lot in the church, who's raising their family, that this is not what this is turning out to be?
Right. Well, that was pretty quickly realized, actually, because when I was working outside the home, like I was in daycare at the time.
Yeah.
I just didn't have the energy to help out as much as I thought I would.
Right.
I didn't have we didn't have the resources either. Like we couldn't have people over all the time and be entertaining all the time.
Because you're supplementing his income because he's not getting paid enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And is he thriving in this position? As you said, he was a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Is he thriving? Are people's lives being changed? Are people getting saved? Are the youth getting better? Are they seeing, their path with the Lord? What's going on with his work at the church?
I think we saw some good stuff happening.
Right.
But we also saw a lot of not so good stuff happening.
Yeah.
From the very beginning to our marriage was not on a solid footing.
Right.
We did fight a lot.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah. And back then in the beginning, what were the fights about? Was it about money or was it about you not helping? What were the fights about?
Yeah, it was about what I wasn't doing.
Right.
Even back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And throughout all the 18 years of marriage that we had, it was about me not helping.
Right. Yeah.
Not doing
and so
what he
did you
expected
try
me
to
do.
express that, listen, I'm now working out of the home, which is, well, let me ask you this before I ask you that. When you got married and when was there a conversation about what this life is going to look like for two just out of Bible college people who have a call, he has a call of God on his life and you are ready to help and you have the tools, at least even, the head knowledge of what the word says and things like that. What was your discussion? What was your vision together as people who are going to lead others?
I think that was one of the things where we really lacked, actually, is the communication aspect of things. We did not talk about those kinds of things.
Right.
I don't remember talking about them at all. And I think it's taken a long time for me to realize this, but I expected him to be the spiritual leader of the household.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is that he was basically a baby Christian. He had just become a Christian.
Yeah.
Just a couple of years maybe before I met him.
Yeah.
And to expect him to do all that was probably not
in your best interest.
Not in either of us best interest.
Yeah.
So
what about him made you form this image of him and in turn have the expectations of him to be the spiritual leader? Because you said you discovered that he was just a baby Christian, but when you met him, that leads me to assume that you thought, no, he was very, he was mature in the faith.
Right.
What had given you that impression? Was he just a big game talker? Did he talk a good game? Or what was it?
He was really good at making it seem like he knew more than he did. In fact, he's kind of still good at that.
Yeah.
But he was very good at coming across knowledgeable, coming across as confident and very all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you relied on him to be the head of the home. Do you think that maybe your perception of your father, especially after him affirming that your struggle as a family was coming from your name and whatever issues with shame and guilt happening in the home, do you think there was a desire for you to be with a man that you could rely on and lean on, and you wanted to see this man who leads has pride in who they are and their family? Do you think that was maybe some of the part that formed your expectations of your husband?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was he aware that those were your expectations?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think we did not communicate very well.
Yeah.
We didn't even complete premarital counseling.
Yeah. I say that I didn't do premarital counseling either. And my husband and I have had to work through a lot of things because, we came to realize that we were two very hurt people that came together, and we definitely, like they say, two wrongs don't make a right. That was the experience, is when you start discovering that you both need to go through this healing experience because no one communicates. I don't remember either having a conversation with my husband like, look, so we're going to get married and then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. Most of the early years of our marriage were very responsive, right? If something happens, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, they said their house is being sold. We're going to save for a house.
Yeah.
But there was never a plan about our house in the beginning, you know? So I completely get it, where we get into these relationships and we assume or we think that some things are just, they're somehow subliminally communicated and it's just fusing and, what is that science thing called, photosynthesis or it's just working but nobody says anything. But you later on discover that maybe a conversation about this would have let me know that this might not be the person that I need to be with. And I think it's more so painful when your reliance was on your faith, on your faith, when you're thinking like, okay, we're people of faith and we should be good. We don't even need to have a discussion. Somehow it's going to happen, but you don't have that. So the first experience at the church, what happened with that job?
It only lasted 9 months.
Right.
And there was some issues already in the church before we came.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize that at the time. We wouldn't have probably gone if we had known that.
Yeah.
But
are you free to talk about what those issues were or no?
I'm not even sure what all they were. I know that they had some issues with the pastor.
Okay.
And so at the end of 9 months, they kicked out their pastor and
so the youth
pastor. Yeah.
Okay.
And the youth pastor, which was us at the same time. So whatever those issues were, they came to a head at that point and we were gone out of the church.
Right. So what's the conversation when you have this? Is it God has decided to give us another opportunity? Like, how is the ending of the job connecting with your faith at this point? Is it, because I know as believers, but sometimes you say, no, God has a different path for me. Some people say when God closes the door, he opens a window. Maybe not very scriptural, but, we do say those things. God has a plan and purpose for our lives. There's something else. We say all these things to comfort ourselves and maybe in most cases not really address the situation. And sometimes in the situation is really what God is trying to tell you, but we're not going there because it's good enough to say he's closed the door, he's opened a window. So what was your conversation? Was this a window is going to open conversation? What did you prayerfully receive it, or what was happening?
I honestly don't remember what I did.
Or was it just like when a regular job ends?
It was almost like a regular job ending, I think.
Yeah.
Because again, I was working outside the home as well.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of, my husband, I think, might have already had a job, just ramped up his hours, and we just kind of went on with our life for a while. And then decided to try one more time.
Yeah.
And so we moved for a job. And again, about 9 months later, I don't know why, maybe it has something to do with, a baby taking my 9 months. I don't know. He was struggling a lot with this job because of
so he had taken another pastoring job again as a youth pastor at a different church. Yeah. Okay.
And the expectations upon him, he was feeling so much pressure, and like he felt he wasn't doing a good job.
Right.
So he ended up actually resigning.
Yeah.
And despite the church being surprised at his resignation, they still accepted it.
Yeah.
And he just took that as a sign that I'm not supposed to pastor anymore.
Right.
And he was very bitter about the church after that.
Yeah. Because did he feel rejected by the church?
Very much
because
so.
They didn't have a conversation with him about why he had come to the point of submitting his resignation.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, when you talk about him feeling that he's not doing enough, as husband and wife, was there any talk about what was enough? What would doing enough in the church mean? What were the results that you were expecting, maybe as a couple, to see your work manifest?
And I know that he had expectations of me.
Yeah.
In particular, I think he felt that he was doing enough all the time, whether it was in our house or in his job or whatever, right? But he felt like I wasn't doing enough ever.
Right. So essentially, what do you think it was a matter of you were the one letting the family down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're not holding your end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that make you feel? Knowing that you're the one who's being, the blame is being placed on.
It was living with a lot of pressure all the time. Yeah. I felt like I was walking on eggshells around him because I didn't want to push the wrong button.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to know, from the girl who escaped, and somewhat it seemed like you had, how are you feeling now? You feeling like you escaped, or you've entered another different type of prison, if you will?
Well, I escaped for a time, and then I entered another a relationship that became a prison. Yes.
Yeah. And at this point, are you fully aware that you're in something that you really shouldn't have been in? I
wasn't fully aware until like 18 years later, almost.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you rationalize the struggles and this constant blame that you were the one who's not meeting up to the expectations of building a family legacy, if you will?
For a long time, I thought I was the problem and that...
You believed it?
I was broken. I needed to be fixed.
Right. Did you have any idea how you could fix yourself?
Not really.
Yeah. So you just kept trying. So your husband is bitter with the church. How does that impact your faith?
I kind of describe it as my wandering through the wilderness.
Yeah.
I definitely had faith still.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that I lost faith. It was that I felt far away from God. And I felt like I just wondered if God even really cared about me.
Yeah. Because you told me that because he was now bitter with the church and this last experience being a youth pastor and handing the resignation in and not really having anyone wanting to reconcile any differences, that you had tried to go to church. And what would happen when you try to go to church?
I would go, and then when I came home, there would be a big fight because he would guilt trip me about, leaving some dishes to be washed or something. Like something was left undone that he figured needed to be done before I went. And it was always this way. And I think I realize now that nothing I would have done would have been enough for him.
Right. So when you went to church and came back, things weren't good because you would use something in the home that was your responsibility and you left it to go to church.
Yeah.
And that was his way of telling you can go to church because he's not going.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is such a terrible thing. So at this point, I want to just kind of bring it in with what we talked about, where when you talked about poverty and never being above that poverty line, what is it looking like financially in your home now? You mentioned your husband was now owning a landscaping company that wasn't doing very well because he was this perfectionist who would work hours and hours on one job and obviously not go to the other. What is happening with this this whole thing with, not going over the poverty line? Where are you at financially as a family?
Around the same time as he started the landscaping business. And he started this because he could not hold down a regular job.
Right.
He tried many different jobs, and for various reasons, he was either fired or he would quit.
Yeah.
And so he started his own landscaping business. And I had heard that there was some tax incentives if I would be partial owner. So I was partial owner. And he also felt that because I was partial owner, I should be working with him right on these jobs. Right around that time, also, I got pregnant.
Yeah.
And I had another job as well at the same time. So I had to balance my own job. I did take maternity leave from my job. So for the first 11 months of my child's life, I would leave my child with the grandparents that were in their 80s at the time, by the way, and go help my husband on work sites.
Yeah.
And we would work our butts off, but we were not really getting ahead. We were going into debt. We did sell a house at the time, and we had the option, because we had a bit of money, to just pay off all our debts and start fresh and new. And he basically turned to me and said, "What should we do?"
Yeah.
I just felt like I was backed up into a corner, and either way I went, I would be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought, if I say, let's start over, you get a regular job, and let's pay off our debts and start over fresh. I just felt like he would be very resistant to that.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to work a regular job, I don't think.
Right.
So I made the decision for us that we would continue doing what we had been doing. We were actually trying to start a second business at the same time. So we went more into debt, way more into debt. And it was not good. There was a lot of financial difficulties until we finally declared bankruptcy because we just couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. So the struggle of being below the poverty line continued to follow you, even through your marriage.
Yes.
And you were in a marriage where you were expected to still work your regular job because you're a part owner of the business. You were still expected to work in the landscaping business. Yeah. But even in spite of that, you were not doing enough.
Yeah.
And then when it came to making the hard decisions, it would come to you. Do you think that part of asking you to make these decisions was so that the blame could always be placed on you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that you were the one who made this decision for us.
Yeah.
And now look where we are now.
Yeah. The awareness of that is very strong with me now. And at the time, I had no clue.
Yeah, you had no clue that you were being set up.
Yeah.
So that the blame could continue to be on you and you would continue to believe it because now there's evidence.
Yeah.
You said, let's do this, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in your home at that time, there was a lot of verbal fighting.
Yeah.
And there was even some physical fighting as well. I want to talk about the verbal fighting. Mm-hmm. There were some things that were said to you. And one of the things that stuck to me was your husband used to call you a useless tool. Mm-hmm. How did that make you feel? Because I don't see, at least I don't, and we shouldn't see our partners as tools. Mm-hmm. So even to say that term useless tool, maybe someone says it once in a fight or whatever, it came up. But this was something that was constantly said to you.
Mm-hmm.
How did that make you feel?
Like less than human.
Of course.
And like I shouldn't even be alive.
Yeah. And I think the worst part of it, you said that because you looked up to him, you wanted the best for him and you expected that he wanted the best for you. And because you trusted him, you believed what he said about you to be true.
Yeah.
So you believed that you were a useless tool. Even if you were working a job, even if you're working in the business, even if you had your baby and you have a baby at home and you're supposed to be on mat leave. There's a reason why they give mat leave. It's not so we can sit and help everybody around us. It's so that our bodies can recover from bringing a human onto the planet, right? Yeah. And so in spite of all these things, you are still believing that you are a useless tool. Yep. That is really devastating and traumatic. How does that trauma impact you now? Because I can see even now that even if you've been emotional the whole time we're talking, that this hits you even much, much harder. Why is that? Why does that one hurt the most?
Because he was supposed to be my life partner. He was supposed to be my cheerleader.
And he beat you down until you couldn't even see yourself. And you have a daughter. What does that make you think when you think of your daughter when they have a partner? What would be your advice to your daughter, knowing what you know now?
Well, definitely communicate.
Yeah.
And have someone to confide in other than your partner.
Yeah.
To, bounce ideas off of, to bounce how you're feeling off of. Because when you're in the thick of it, you don't always see it for what it really is.
Yeah. So, will that be your advice even to other women who maybe right now are in the same situation and completely blindsided, and they just think that what's happening is maybe even that's how life should be? What they're thinking, they don't have value, they're not worthy. Would that be your advice to them today?
Find somebody who's going to speak words that help you grow, not words that shrink you.
Yeah. That is really powerful. I just feel this moment, especially for a lot of women that are experiencing verbal abuse and how sometimes our society thinks that verbal abuse doesn't impact you. I actually think that, as weird as it may sound to somebody, I would rather get hit by something than words because, wounds may heal, but it's very hard to heal words that are spoken to you because words become a thing. Yeah. They become a mindset. Yeah. And then at some point, the longer they fester, they become who you are. Yeah. And before you look, before you know it, you look around and you don't even know why you're here, what your purpose is, what you're supposed to do in your life, because everything is so tied into what has been said about you. Yeah. You are a very resilient woman because in 2013, you made a decision. And that decision started the journey of the woman that is a community healer of people's finances and financial situation and many other things. I want to talk about your healing journey. When did that start and what were those things that helped you? What was that decision that you made in 2013?
July 2013, I made the decision that because I had this 5-year-old child and that was seeing all of this conflict in the home, I was not setting a good example for her.
Yeah.
I was allowing these things to happen.
Yeah. That's a powerful revelation when you say allowing, because sometimes we think that in the midst of this, we don't have permission to still decide. And there's always a way.
Yeah, there is. I made the decision that he'd been threatening for years already to leave or even to hurt me in many ways. And I was like, if anything's going to change, it's all been threats, nothing, no action. So if anything's going to change, I'm going to have to be the one to change it.
Yeah.
So I did leave him. And at the same time, I chose to go back to church as well.
Yeah. What was leaving like? Did you just pack your bags overnight?
No.
Did you rent an apartment? Did you, what did you do? I'll tell you why I'm asking. My sister went through a very abusive relationship. I think I might have shared this with you that at the highest point of the abuse, her husband at the time used to sleep with a weapon under their pillow to intimidate her. I watched my sister being beaten to a pulp. As Black girls, we love to braid our hair, and the braid is actually connected to the hair on the root of our scalp. And I watched those braids be pulled out of her hair, like straight from the root. I remember a day that me and her, we escaped this man. And he speed chased us throughout the whole city till we reached our mom's house. I remember us sprinting through the lawn, getting in the house. And I was the one who closed the door last and shoving this man out. And now with 3 women, myself, my mom and my sister in the house, scared shitless because we used to live in a town. Like, how people live up in the mountains here. And we didn't know if help was going to come. And, this is a man that we knew to have a weapon and what he was going to do.
Yeah.
A couple of days after this experience, we both left. I was working at the time. My mom left to go work. Everyone in the house had things that they did. My sister stayed at home. I think 2 or 3 days into that, we came home and she'd left. She'd gone back to him. And, of course, when you're in an abusive situation, you go back. Somehow part of reuniting with your partner, you share what has happened, who said what, Angie said you should die or whatever was said in the moment, right? And so we become the enemy. And of course, the abuser always uses that information to continue to alienate you from your family. And how can you not believe it? You're the one who brought the information to the table, right? So it was that scenario. But when my sister finally decided to leave this man, she didn't tell anyone. She rented an apartment, packed her stuff, and left. I remember my mom telling me that she was at a church conference and somebody said, "Oh, I saw your daughter in such and such an area." And my mom was like, "No, my daughter don't live there." And then that's when the conversation started. And she said, "Yeah, I left. When she was ready, she was ready."
Right.
So for you, what was it like? How did you plan? And I'm going to call it your escape.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, somehow we kept living in the same apartment for about a month.
Yeah.
It took me about that long to figure out how it was going to work.
Yeah.
So we were basically roommates for a month still.
Yeah.
And so then at that point, I sold a vehicle.
Yeah.
And was in the process of buying something new, something different. And with the difference in money, I was able to put, first month's rent and damage deposit down on an apartment.
Yeah.
It was all God's timing, that's for sure. And it took me a little bit to get a different vehicle. Again, another God story, how that happened.
Yeah.
And just right on time too, because I had planned to take some time off work and go back to Alberta and visit my family, because I hadn't really done that in a long time.
Yeah.
And it was my 40th birthday was that month as well. So I was like, what a great time to go and visit and celebrate with my family.
Yeah.
And I planned on taking my child with me. And my ex was a little bit hesitant, but I managed to convince him I'm coming back.
Yeah.
I put a deposit on this apartment and I'm coming back, like I'm not going to abandon this. So, that's how I even trusted him to do the walkthrough of the apartment because I wasn't going to be here.
Did you know that you were getting the apartment to leave him? Okay. So he knew at that point that this was done.
Oh, he knew.
And he didn't try to fight
the month
you
earlier. Yeah.
Because at the point where you were leaving as roommates, it was pretty clear to him that you were leaving. So you leave and you said you start this life, you have your child, but then financially you're struggling, you were working at Starbucks. Yeah. And then one day you just had this revelation. You were like, no, I'm not doing this in my life anymore. What was the decision you made then?
Well, I think the circumstances of my life, I think God uses circumstances to push you to do things, right? Yeah. So the circumstances were that I actually got a demotion at work because I was a supervisor, and I had received some complaints or something. I'm not even clear on the details. Yeah. But they were telling me that I needed to go back to being a barista. I couldn't be a supervisor anymore. And I was like, well, you know what? This is a pretty clear indication that since I'm not moving up the line, I'm moving down, I have to get out of here one way or another. And so I decided to go back to school.
Kind of feels like another place too where your worth is not being appreciated. Yeah. You're not being valued because now they're demoting you, whatever, the circumstances were. It's still, I think, for you, something that obviously rose up some other things from the past as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I tried to become an assistant manager a couple times.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
It just didn't work out. So, and I think it was all God's plan, yes. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it did have a lot to do with my own self-esteem issues, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go back to school?
Yeah, I went back to school for a 10-month school while I was working. And it was definitely hard 10 months to get through.
Yeah, because a baby and school and work.
Yeah. Well, the baby's in school now. So
but still,
6 years old.
they are like in what? Like,
how old would she have been? Grade 5.
Okay.
Or 6.
Yeah.
Grade 6, I think, actually.
So at least old enough to understand what mom's doing and, why maybe there isn't so much time together or the other things that you did. So a good age where, to build them up as well in just social skills and knowing that circumstances can change around the home and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you go to school and you do your education assistant course, but you're still seeing that there's still something happening with that mindset around money and the struggling. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes important to you at that time to begin to educate yourself on how finances actually work.
Yeah. Yeah. And God brought a friend into my life to help me in that area. Yeah. And it was great. And even during school, I think being an education assistant was not an accident either. Yeah. Because what I was learning, I was like, oh, I see my kid in what I'm learning. Yeah. And as a result of that, I pushed for a diagnosis. Yeah. And now, we get help in school.
Okay, so that made you understand what your daughter was struggling with. Yeah. And at the time they hadn't seen that she's on the spectrum. Yeah. And she was just struggling and you obviously wouldn't have known what to do. Yeah. But that helped you to recognize. So the very first person that you help is yourself and your daughter. Yeah. Because obviously that diagnosis allows for a better relationship and a better learning experience for your daughter.
Yeah.
Wow.
And more resources for us as parents,
exactly.
too.
And you can now access the resources and you can advocate for your child much better.
Exactly.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now you teach, you educate yourself about money, and your friend invites you to a meeting, and you discover that there's a whole career. You can be a financial counselor, and beyond that, you can help yourself through your finances.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me that this year you're on track to double your income.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what do we say now about being above the poverty line?
For the first time ever,
For the first time ever. But you see how that it is possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I truly, truly love hearing how, as women, we can pick ourselves up and we can, open doors for ourselves, and that we are willing to work hard to achieve our goals. And that's what you did. You had worked all this time in places where you were not appreciated, but you took that work ethic and you worked hard to make changes for your daughter when you left your husband. And now you've built this life and you're now teaching others in the community. So I want to wrap up our conversation today with, if you were looking at a woman today that is in the same situation, struggling with self-worth, self-esteem, finances, and in a relationship where they feel unwanted and unappreciated, what would you say to that woman today? And I think that woman might also be you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are valuable.
Yes.
What you think matters.
Yeah.
And you are definitely stronger than you think.
Yes. You are stronger than you think. Thank you, Suzanne.